and I had a date, and I put it and I lock the note. And I'm almost positive if I didn't go for that trip, I wouldn't have anything to change my mind. What I was actually longing for in my heart was love. And eventually I give in and I'm like, hey God, you have my heart. But for me, the greatest miracle is that I was blind, but I now see. My testimony isn't how far God has brought me, but it's the fact that He keeps me every day.
Today, we hear a story of addiction, darkness, and a decision that could have ended everything, and the God who kept calling him back. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Linda Rono, and this is Found by Grace. So we are here to testify, as Mark 5:19 tells us, when Jesus was saying, go home to your friends and tell them what the Lord has done. So today we have a very special guest who is going to tell us what the Lord has done for him.
My name is Bradley Mbai. I'm happy to be here. I'm here to talk about my experience, my life experience, what God has been able to do for me in my life story. And even as before we got on set here, I was talking to someone who probably should be here doing a testimony as well, Cyril. But yeah, it's a story. It's the story of what testimonies are. Most of the time, what has happened to be the case with testimonies is people have romanticized darkness, where people have become fascinated with the depth of sin rather than the greatness of Christ in bringing them out. And I was talking about, there was this story in Luke, I believe Luke 5, of the blind man. And when the blind man finally goes out to the priests and he starts talking to them about his experience, he's not going to them and saying, I was so blind, I was so much blinder than the average man. He just says, I was blind, but now I see. And I think there is such a great miracle behind God's capacity to sustain us and to keep us, even in spite of the fact that He already brought us out. I think there is a greater miracle in God's capacity to sustain us. And so today I'd like to share my story of what Christ was able to do for me in my experience. But even more so, I want to talk about this God in His capacity to be able to keep me now that I am here.
Amen. Amen. That's a beautiful introduction. And I believe you have come a very, very long way. And I can't wait to hear your story. So I think we'll jump right into your story.
Okay. So maybe start with my childhood. I am second of 5 kids. And we were actually, my folks are Adventist, which is something I am particularly grateful for, because now looking back in my story would become a lot longer, would become a lot more difficult had it not been the influence of Adventism in growing up. We grew up Adventist, at least in the early years of my upbringing. We went to church regularly. My mom was in the choir, beautiful singer. My dad was also in church. So there was the influence of Christianity in our household. But as we grew up, you start getting autonomy of sense, where you're able to start thinking as an individual, to be able to start to want certain things, to be able to perhaps notice certain things. And that's what happened to me. I think I grew up faster than my friends were always like 5-6 years older, so I was like a 10-year-old working with 15-16-year-olds. And so what happens, I think at around when I was 11, I was taken into boarding school. And I don't know if this is the experience for most people, but I was happy because I was a bit more, I was freer. I was able to do certain things on my own. I was able to, I had all the autonomy I wanted. I was able to be myself, to be able to go to church a bit more voluntarily. It wasn't voluntarily, it was church from school. It was a school program basically. But there was a sense of autonomy whereby I could be able to do whatever. I could be able to go. I was able to go without the influence of my parents. That was freedom for me, at least at that point
Right.
in my growth.
Did you have a very difficult childhood, and did it affect you even now? Like, are there things that you have carried from that phase
Yeah.
to your, current life?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, with my childhood, again at that particular point, for most of my growing up, we were just three, just me and my two sisters. I was the middle of the two, and we'd have all this back and forth with my folks, my mom in particular, and it used to be quite a hassle, and I would remember. But anyway, this is standard, I guess, in an African household where you'd get a bit of meetings at home. But I think ours was slightly over the top. But yeah, and then should start bonding with my sisters over this, where I remember me and my sisters would have experiences where we would only be able to confide with to each other. We'd sit together. We'd every now and then talk to each other. And I remember at a certain point growing up, they were girls, so they had it a bit more rough than I did, in the sense that I could take a beating better than they could. And at a certain point, I noticed that it would become harder on them if I was suffering like them. It would, for whatever reason, it just felt harder on them. So I had to start sucking it up. So when we'd have beatings and stuff like that, I would have to usually go fast and suck it up and make sure they would see that it's not too bad, and then they would have their thing every now and then. But and this isn't just in the regard of perhaps like standard things where you expect, like in every African household where you expected to do this and then you didn't do them. They were a bit more random, and at a certain point, so doing that, growing up, having to grow up that young, like when I was 8 or something, when you have to grow up that early, you start having difficulty. You start having to repress a lot. And
You bottle up.
yes, you bottle up a lot. And so I think, for example, this for me starts, it's not too obvious when you're young. It's not entirely obvious, because as a child, in a sense, what the only thing that's happening is I'm going through this, I'm going through that, but this is still my mom, this is still my dad. I'm still going to come back in the evening and have stories for my mom. You're not you don't you're not as discerning just yet. But this for me starts to show up when I go into boarding school. So like I remember when I go into boarding school, and this was amazing for me. Boarding school was amazing because, again, I grew up like a lot faster, and I was doing pretty well in school, and I do really well, and so I have a lot more people who are fond of me, away from the influence of my folks and all these things. But then now the consequence of that as well is I'm introduced to people I would never have interacted with in life. Friends, they become friends, at least some of them. Again, because I had friends who were significantly older. There are friends who introduced me much earlier into stuff that I was so young for. Which, for example, for one of them is I was introduced into sex way too early. It happened, I was like 12. Yeah, so it was when I was 12. Again, under over the influence of friends who are much older than me. And since it was a boarding school and it was in the country, you have friends, some who are in primary school who are much older, like 16, maybe 17. Like maybe 17 is too much, like let's say like 16. So you have people who have been exposed to stuff I had never been exposed to, at least on a one-to-one basis. And then so they start introducing me into stuff like that. And it was interesting, and I start growing up. And this isn't, again, I've been in a home space where I'm not exactly able to share this with my folks. Not that it is concerning for me at this point. I'm just a kid who's being introduced to stuff. I don't even know if this is detrimental. It's just new stuff. It's new information. And this was very interesting for me because then it starts setting me up for addictions really, really young. So this is like 12, maybe about 13 at this point. It's introducing me into addictions really early. But then again, I'm in a space where no one knows what's happening. My siblings were not in the same school. I was in a boarding school, like 7 hours away from home. 7, 8. Yeah, like 8 hours or something. Yeah, and so it's that far, and you have friends who I really enjoy their company, to be honest, because they're not like bullies or anything. These are just friends who I know, and they admire me a lot because I was doing really well in school. I was the cool kid from Nairobi, and so they're like, you're from Nairobi and you don't know this and this. And so they start introducing me into this, into this. And teachers are more, they're able to notice certain things more when it's happening to the kids who are stubborn in school. Not so much the kid who's doing really well, who is excelling. And so this goes unnoticed entirely. And it wasn't, so there's a lot of that going on, and it keeps happening. And it's not just heterosexual activity, also homosexual. And
Was it a mixed school?
yeah, it was a mixed school. Yeah, this is primary boarding school. And again, way too early. And I'm like, you're a kid, you're like 12, 13. You don't know what you should know, what you shouldn't know. So and then the openness and the innocence of kids of exploring and trying stuff. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And you go through these experiences. And again, I'm so happy that I'm not home, by the way, at this point. So me, as long as I have money, I'm away from home, everyone is okay. I'm happy about this. And so I grow up, I go back home. This is like a few years go by, like maybe 2. I'm like 14 at this point. And then now I get introduced. This isn't so much friends, but so much an exploitation of what I'd already been introduced to by myself now at this point, where you start searching, and you're a child still at this point. You start searching, and I'm searching, and you discover pornography. And then again, and it was a building addiction. And this is, and I don't think people talk about this enough. People usually talk about, when regards addictions and stuff like that, people usually talk about addictions and they only talk about substance. But addictions, most of addictions exist within predispositions, that you're predisposed to something where you are introduced to something, and from the moment you're introduced to it, you have an unhealthy interaction with it because there is a predisposition inside of you. And there's such a thing as sexual predisposition, which people don't know. And so as a kid, you're introduced way too early into this, and you start going into, and you're like, because now again with predisposition, and I remember a while back listening to an interview about someone who fought addictions of alcoholism most of his life into his 30s. He's like in his mid 30s right now. So like into 30s, no, late 30s. So into like his early 30s, 31, 32 thereabout. And they were saying one of the things that helped him in his journey is getting to a space where you realize you'll never have a healthy interaction with that thing. So if it's alcohol, it's the realization that I will never have a proper relationship with alcohol, at least in that context. And so the same is true for every other thing. If you have addictions with like sexual addictions, you realize that you will never have a safe interaction with this where it's good enough for you to like be, most people are able to, and this is the story of a lot of people which I later again meet in high school and stuff like that. People who try alcohol for the first time, and they're okay, they can stop anytime. They do alcohol for like 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and they're okay, they never get to alcoholism, they can just stop. But there's this innocent person who tries it, but they are predisposed to it. And from the moment they try it, it's almost like they were prodigies at this. They try it for the first time and they go downhill like super, super fast. And so the same thing, the thing was, the same thing happened for me with regards sexual addiction. So everything is going downhill very fast. And again, growing up, I used to be a very, very outgoing kid. Very outgoing. And stubborn. I used to get
You're the
hurt a
black
lot.
sheep.
Yeah.
Not so much.
Something like I think then I was the stubborn golden child. As I used to do really well. So I was stubborn, but they're like, he does really well, so he can get away with it. But eventually it starts becoming I don't know, with the nature of conflict we had at home. It was beaten into me because we used to go out, me and my older sister used to go out a lot and like do crazy stuff.
So this is at what point that you are going out?
So I've gone just a bit back. This is when, like as a child, I mean, when you're going just out to play.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is when I'm like 8, 7. We're going out to play, but we'd go back home and like get proper beatings over stuff like that. So eventually, I learned that maybe I'm not just supposed to go out. So I stopped, and like I remember I was like a kid and there was like a PlayStation. So I was like found a new hobby. So I just stopped going. I just stopped going out entirely. So again, this was drilled into me much earlier. So I don't exactly have friends at this point apart from the friends I have in school. So when I go back home, I'm not walking out of the house. I'm just seated. I'm doing either TV or I'm playing video games and stuff like that. So I'm not doing anything apart from this. And now, so my point was, now that I am having this introduction into addictions and stuff like that, I don't care to particularly go out and talk to anyone. Like, most people assume that when people start this type of things, they start to feel like something is wrong. That's not true, especially with young people, children especially. Before they get into a mental space of this, something is wrong about this, it's much, much later, especially if they are not taught about this. Because remember, to a child, this is very intense stimuli for adults. So for a child, this is very new. They're in a space where they're learning so much, and so this is just new stimuli. But if there's one thing is I'm not supposed to tell adults I'm doing this. That's at least all you know. So I'm like, I won't tell any adult at this point. And I won't tell any siblings. I at least have the knowledge as a kid who was brought up Christian that this is wrong. It doesn't feel wrong, but it's morally wrong. I know that it's wrong. So I keep doing this on my own and start exploring. And then, of course, once you start the journey of pornography, the next thing, for at least for the male child, at least it's almost the immediate step after, it's masturbation, which is incredibly addictive in it. And so you start the journey, and this is again 14, pretty early.
This is even before high school.
This is before high school. Yeah, this is before high school. So start that, and I'm experiencing. So I've already been introduced. Now I'm introduced into pornography, into masturbation, into sex, and not heterosexual and homosexual. So it's a whole thing for 14 years. And so I get into high school, and I went to high school in Maseno. And I go to high school, and I start my experience there. But at this point, I'm not like entirely addicted. But I get into high school, and again, if you think high school primary kids are bad influences, wait until you meet high school. Because now you have people from everywhere, not just from that area.
Yeah.
It's people from all over the country, at least in a school like Maseno. And so we go there, and so a lot of things. And this is where, and God is amazing, because this is where He starts to try and meet me. Because again, I was going to church as a kid and whatnot, but it was never personal. It was, we go to church, that's it. And so what happens is we go to high school, and I'm being introduced into now two new other worlds, which for me, one is I'm being introduced into more secularism. And so on one hand, I meet people, friends, and at this point, I remember there was this new genre of music coming up. It was called like trap music, hip hop and trap music. So I'm meeting people who dance. I only ever saw dancers on movies, and I get people who, and I'm talking like break dancing and stuff like that, and I'm like, this is nice. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get people who do amazing stuff. They can, and I'm like, wow, I want to learn this. And I even start dancing. I start doing this. I start doing that. I was doing everything basically. Anything that was exciting, I started doing. I remember even I used to draw as a kid, but that's why I really started drawing like a lot, positive and negative. And then this one Sabbath, Maseno, at least when I was in school, one thing that happened was we didn't have Sabbath in its fullest sense. But anyway, that wasn't a problem for me, because again, it's not personal for me. It's just, and I wasn't told by my folks about Sabbath keeping and stuff like that. So anyways, I knew the type of household I grew up in was the type of household where, I mean, if I went home because I was keeping the Sabbath, it would be worse than if I just stayed in school. So so it was easier, and not that I cared, but it would have been easier for me to stay in school. So I go to this one point, they were like, but I was bored about staying in class. So if the alternative is going to church, I wanted to see what church is like.
Different.
Yeah, so I'm like, let me go see what church is about. If my options are staying in class or going to church, let me go to church. So we have captains in our school who came up and were like, how many are SDA? So we are meeting from 10 a.m. Not 10. Yeah, 10 a.m. It used to be 10 a.m. to 1, like 1 p.m. thereabout. So in like a classroom. At that time, we were not too many, so we could fit in a classroom. And this is in a school of about 2,000 people. So or at least many Adventists were not coming to church anyways. So I go to church, and I experience, wow, like people were singing and people were doing all these things, and it felt like you'd think it would be normal for me who has been Adventist, but it was different. It was very different. And so I experienced this Adventism, and I'm like, wow. And I really obsess over stuff. So it starts showing in church as well. So I'm like really excited, and I hear an a cappella group for the first time. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I start listening, and then I'm like impressed. I'm really impressed. And these are like really smart gentlemen too. And I'm like, wow. So I go for afternoon, just to hear more music and see what people are up to. And I go for the afternoon, and I hear them I hear for the first time beasts. I'm like, and they're talking about the beast being a nation. I'm like, okay, interesting. I've never even heard that. So I'm like super intrigued because I really love history too. So I'm like, I always thought a beast was like an actual beast. So I'm like, oh,
I know, yeah. A lot of
Oh.
people actually know beasts. Actually, a
me,
lot of people fear reading
Yeah.
the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel
It feels
because of the
literal.
beasts,
Yeah.
because people think they're literal.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't want to explore, but actually,
Yeah.
it's very interesting when you begin to learn.
I'm telling you, and it's amazing for me because I'm hearing this from 16-year-olds. I'm like, ish, wow, this is amazing. And I was so excited. But you need to remember that at the same time, I'm being exposed into a lot of secularism as well. So I start living a parallel life. I'm really enjoying church, but I'm really also enjoying the secularism I'm being introduced to. And I start enjoying it more and more, both actually. And until at a certain point, I'm always showing up for Bible study in church until they think I'm a church regular who has good church standing at home, is a proper believer. And you know what they do? They choose me to be a Bible study leader.
Oh.
I'm like, what? And how old am I? I'm like 15. So I'm like, what's going on? But I'm like I don't want to miss church. But after church, I'm going to entertainment and doing all these things. And I'm like, so I accept it, but I'm still doing everything that I was doing. And they introduced me to more. And I remember up until this point, I used to be like terrified of speaking to girls. Terrified. Our self-esteem was crushed growing up like in our home setting, it was crushed. So you couldn't, so
And
I didn't,
addictions also take away your self-esteem.
oh yeah. And so like for me, I don't think I'm able to talk to girls, but this is the season, punkies and stuff like that. And I'm hanging out with the cool kids of the school. I'm like, hey, I can't even. And so I start looking up to them, like, show me how to do this. That's so funny. Like, teach me how to talk to girls. Most of them, you find this out later. Again, kids are like really nice. Most of them I find out later, they didn't even know what they were doing. They were liars. They were just liars. Kids, anyways, it's being a teenager. And so they're introducing me to this stuff. They keep coming back to school and telling us, oh, how they had sex with these girls and all these things. And they tell you all these stories, and I'm like, wow. Because now in my addiction, I'm like, I aspire to be you, man. I aspire to be like you. But again, I'm still young, I'm still terrified, and I'm still juggling both of this with church. And I'm growing from 1, from 2, from 3, all the way to Form 4. But my faith is really growing, but my secularism was also really growing. I found a way to just have both of them because I was so good at church now at this point, and not good in keeping church and that. I was so good with my understanding. And I would do Bible studies, and people were like, Amen. And they're like, wow. And the church was growing as a consequence of what was going on, how God was using me, which is amazing that God was using me in spite of everything that was happening in my life. And I'm growing up, and I'm doing that in church, and I'm doing this with my secular life, but I found a way to separate them entirely. When I'm in church, I'm church. I'm even mentoring people in church, but when I'm here, I am fully here. And then I became a captain in school. Even more reason for like a captain is prefect for maybe those. Our school was using that. Yeah, so certain people look up to you. Certain people enjoy your time in the secular experience as well. So I'm both ways. I'm living both ways, and I grow and grow until I think like when I was 17 or something. I now again remember my friends were teaching me how to talk to girls and stuff like that. I'm super awkward at this one. I'm like a super awkward kid. But I think most of it was because my self-confidence was almost non-existent, at least in this regard. And I think I was introduced by a friend of mine. I was introduced to this lady. She was in her 20s at that point. I'm like 16. I was 16. I was 16 at this point. I'm introduced to again older guys. Once few of them my age introduce me to, and we start talking to girls, campus girls, because Maseno School is right next to Maseno University.
Oh.
Yeah, so there were, and our school wasn't, people would leave school like, it was illegal, of course, but people were able to, it was very easy. Our school didn't have a fence. Yeah, and we used to, I remember when I was in Form 1, we used to go for cross countries outside the school, so you could always leave. And so I'm introduced, and I'm learning now. And this is an older lady. Interestingly, she's like showing me stuff. She's teaching me, but doesn't necessarily get all the way sexual. But she was teaching me stuff, and she was showing me how we do it, stuff like this, this and that, this and that. And I'm learning from older women, but because it's a much older woman too, I'm like, I'm 16, she's like 22 or something. I'm like, start growing confidence. Oh, turns out I can actually talk to girls. And I start doing it, start growing just a tad bit more confidence. But again, and I thank God for this, because I think at some point I'm exposed enough to be able to be in sexual settings. But, and I don't know if it was because of the pornography, because of the masturbation, but I had a very difficult time seeing it through, seeing the sexual thing through. It was very hard for me. And I was exposed a lot all the time. It was becoming harder and harder. And I think eventually, I'm done with high school at this point, and I go out there into the world. But then the very thing that was holding me spiritually was there. I was in high school. I'm back into this world where I'm sharing a space with my folks again. I'm not active in church. People don't even know me that well in church. And so I'm back home, and my experience now at this point is, do you want to continue going to church or not? And a lot was going on in my personal life. Oh, and then a year later, this happened a year later. At some point, at this point, I meet a girl who, I don't know even if I should call this a relationship. You see how people do, or at least I don't know if people still do this. Where it wasn't, you don't ask people to be your girlfriend. You just start, and
The fling.
yeah, and even if at some point it ends up being exclusive, it just started. I never asked you to be my girlfriend. You didn't ask me if I'm your girlfriend and stuff like that. It just starts, and until eventually it's my girlfriend, it's my boyfriend, but we're not exclusive. If that makes sense. Whatever happens out there, man. So this is about to happen in my experience at some point, and so I'm struggling here and so I'm supposed to join campus, and I'm struggling with this because I was supposed to join School of Engineering, Civil Engineering. I get into class like a week. I can't do this, so I leave. So I was struggling again with the purpose thing, and then I get into computer science. I still can't do it, and then at a certain point, and this is a bit later. This is now we get to about COVID, and now I just start working. My mom gets me a job where I can just work, and so I start working, and I'm like 19, 20. Yeah, so I start working, and so I'm not as interested in about going to church, and so I just stopped. Okay, not instantly where I'm just stop. I would go every once in a while, but I'm still struggling. And then something happens during COVID. In COVID, we are COVID in our place. It was fully locked down. Like we didn't leave home at all for 8 months. This was from when did COVID, like March.
Yeah,
It was like
around March.
the
The
official
lockdowns
lockdown,
around
March.
April. Yeah,
March,
March,
April,
April.
yeah.
Yeah.
So because I remember from in our set, it was from March to October, end of October.
Where was this?
Where our place.
Yeah, where they were full lockdown and you can't leave.
Okay, this is in State House. Yeah, because my mom stays there. So so this was in State House. It was fully locked down, and we were not allowed to leave. And I'm still staying with my folks at this time. And so it ends up happening that at this particular point in time, this is the first time in our house where we stay together in the house from morning to evening without leaving, without going anywhere. It never happened in my life. And then it starts getting more intense and more intense. And that stress gets to people. Like we even had a suicide case in our estate because someone who had gotten used to doing stuff, doing all these things, now isn't able to do anything. They just got depressed and committed suicide. So there's a lot going on. And so again, even if we wanted to at this point, we're not going to church. And we occasionally have a home worship. I'm not the singing was nice. I really enjoyed the singing, but I'm not too excited about God and stuff like this. But again, the influence of high school is still tugging at my heart. But now I'm working against it. And slowly, I break it off. I break it off. I'm just slowly but surely, until I'm like, this church thing isn't my thing. And so I stopped going to church. I even started going to work on Sabbath. Even on days, because I remember we used to work on Saturday, but we used to work on Saturday like an hour or 2. So, and my folks knew this, but they didn't know this. So when they wanted to force me to go to church, I'd be like, have work. And so I'd be out until by the time they're supposed to go to church, I'm already done with work. So I'm like, I wouldn't just go home. I'd just go to my friends and wait until they'd go to church and then go to the house. And at this point, me and a certain friend of mine from high school, we start hanging out a lot more. And my home situation is stressing me out so bad. And with my school stuff.
So this is after the lockdown.
Yes, this is now after the lockdown. And we are hanging out a lot more and stuff like that. And one day I'm just chilling with my friend, and there's something that happened before where I sat with this friend of mine, we sat hanging out, and I remember we would throw parties, but at this point I've never even tried drugs just yet. I'm still okay with that. At least the upbringing of no one in my home would do drugs and stuff like that. It was good enough. So even now that I'm around everyone who does it, I'm okay. Like I don't do it. And so I start at one particular point. I remember at one party, and it was my birthday, actually, my birthday party. And I was doing my birthday party, stuff like that. And then stuff got really, really stressful. And at a certain point, I'm like, you know what? Everyone seems to be so happy here being drunk and stuff like that. And I take the thing. And I'm like, it wasn't one of those things where you're introduced and you start by a little and you taste and you're like, you react. It was just the whole thing. And I'm like, if I have a predisposition for alcoholism, God was very faithful in keeping me away from alcoholism, because my first encounter with it was like chugging the whole thing, and I was like, and it felt amazing. I'm not going to be one of those people who, it was terrible. No, no, no. It was amazing. And I was there and I was drunk. But anyways, the hangover was something else. It was terrible. But now you realize, oh, when stuff starts to get bad, I can do something about it.
Have a solution.
Yeah, like I can actually do something about this. And I start drinking, but alcohol really wasn't my thing, man. I used to do it almost against my will. Not that people were coercing me, but I had to because I'm not. It's if it's this or stress, I will take it. So I do that, and then a few months later, I am introduced to weed, and I was like, this is it for me. This is heaven. This. And I started using it a lot and a lot with my friend thereabout, and we just be on, but not as frequently too. And I thank God for that. It was something where it was an on and off where I do this, maybe weekends. Weekends was it, and we keep going at this, and we're doing this, and this goes on for years now at this point. Like years are going by, and I'm doing more and more and more, and then I was with someone at that point who, and again this was again later, God shows me that when I finally meet God again, it's that I was also it was easier for me to to be with this person and the world than to be with God and without this person. So it's like, again, I'm in a relationship that, again, no one coerces me. I was just embarrassed about being Christian. It felt embarrassing to tell someone that, oh, I'm starting to be Christian again. So it was a means of keeping me away from God. And yeah, and so I stay away from God, and over time, eventually I get into this point, and everything is so depressing for me. The drugs aren't doing it, the partying isn't doing it, and I remember again my relationship with my folks is getting, it's so bad. It's getting worse. It's getting terrible, and I remember. And I remember at this point, even if my mom sees this, it will be funny. And I don't know if my folks ever knew I was doing drugs, but it should have been obvious. I remember like these two instances. One point, this is so funny. I was I was I was I was partying and stuff like that, and I was like so drunk. I don't think I'd ever gotten that drunk in a public space, because I used to do it, but with friends and stuff like that. It was so bad. I called my dad. I'm like, hey dad, hey leo usiponikujia dad, sioni kama nafika home. So my dad, and I thank God my dad is a really good guy. And this is like 11 or something. And I'm like, dad, wait. And I'm in Westlands. I'm like, hey dad, if you don't come for me leo, hii hapa sioni kana kuja leo. And he's like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm in Westlands, I'm going to town right now. Could you pick me up in town? And so there's this friend of mine who would keep our phones when we go partying together, because he was the only one who could drink and stay sober enough to take care of everyone else. So that's what we do. When we start, we give him our phones, our wallets, everything, and he'd keep it. And when he sees that, oh, it's time for you to go, or like you're getting really bad, he'd call an Uber for you, or put you in a matatu, or put you in his car so that you can wait. He was also called Bradley. And so this was so funny. I go home. No, I get to town, and this is the first time, and this is public, and the town and the noise, and I'm walking, and I'm trying to walk straight, and I see myself getting into the traffic, and I'm like, and then my dad tells me where he is, and I'm able to get there. Again, a miracle, and I'm alone because Brad had put me into a matatu to town, and I'm in town. And now I'm thinking about where to get my dad, and I get there, and I'm pretty sure I had the stench of alcohol and stuff like that. But I'm talking to my dad, and for people who have done this. I hope not. And I was trying to sound sober, and you talk so loud because you're trying to sound. and I'm
Yeah.
talking so. I'm like, "How's your day, Dad?" And I don't realize I'm probably blowing off. Looking back, I'm so thankful for my dad, man. I'm so thankful for him because I'm pretty sure at a certain point he knew, but he didn't know what to do. Like, this is the first time. This is the first child he's dealing with who's doing drugs. He didn't do drugs. At least I think he did. If he did, he didn't tell us. So he's patient with me. He doesn't say anything. My mom, on the other hand, my mom was wild. Anyway, we like, this is another instance. I'm going back home, and she's like,
So on
"It's
that
11."
day, sorry, let me just take you back. So on that day, so after he picked you up, you went home, and did your mom see you?
Not on that particular day. My mom was already asleep.
Wow.
My mom was already. Thank God she was asleep. Because the one time, and I don't even know that she knew I was under the influence at this point. And I go home and it's late, and she called me a million times. I didn't pick up, and she's like, "This boy is not getting into my house," and she locks the door and she sleeps with the keys. It's like, "This boy is not getting into my house." And I go to the window and I start knocking. I knock on the window and I'm like, let me in. And my dad comes and he's like talking to me. He's like, why are you coming this late and stuff like that. And he starts negotiating with my mom, and my mom won't let me into the house. And she's like, let him go back. And at this point, everyone has gone to their places. The one who brought me home is a lady who's going back to her dad. She can't go back home with me for any reason. And so I'm like, ah. So I'm there, and my mom refuses. So my dad brings me the car keys very carefully, and he gives it to me, and I end up sleeping in the car. And it was one of the worst. It was one of the coldest nights I've ever experienced. It was terrible. But anyway, stuff is getting worse. My relationship at home is getting worse. I'm getting depressed. None of these things are doing it for me. Yeah, it was getting a lot worse. And at a certain point, now again, my relationship was amazing, but it was very toxic. It was just terrible. And at least in that regard, it was I was going through it, but I didn't want to leave for anything in the world. I did not want to leave. And it keeps going, and I can feel a tug in my heart that I want something better for you. I want something better for you. And God is so patient with me. And he keeps nudging me every now and then. Every now and then he's nudging at me. And he would nudge, and then I would almost respond, and then something would happen. Because I remember at this one point, and I can say this about my friends because they are now testaments like my So I had these friends much older again, they're like 5-6 years older, and some of them are friends from church. Now friends from church in the sense of we grew up together. We would grow up together. So now we're like old, and we want to do stuff. And so what turns out is, when I was in high school, when I was sort of on fire for God, what happened was that they had already started doing the partying and alcohol and stuff like that, but they didn't know if I was safe to invite. Yeah, so they were doing it, but without me. They're still going to church and all that. So when at one point they call me after COVID, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, I don't do church anymore, stuff like that, da da da, and they're like, oh, so we're doing this on Friday. And I'm like, when do you guys start hanging out? They're like, we've always been doing this. We just didn't know if you were safe to invite. Like, yeah, you might have snitched to the elders and stuff like that. And again, it speaks to what's happening in our churches even now, you know? We're always looking for the people outside, but it's happening inside our churches. And so what's happening is we go out and we've gone outside. We start going for parties. And now it's a lot better because it's my childhood friends. And I'm like, this is amazing, man. And at this point, they're like 25, 26, I'm 20. And we're doing all these things. We do stuff like that. I remember like, this is so wild. I remember like in this one particular instance, they had said, so everyone was saying, so like, oh, I'm with Linda. Oh, I'm with this person. Oh, I'm with Cyril. So that your parents know you're in church. You're going for a church event. But we were going for Naivasha rally, the rally thing.
Oh.
So for me, it was strange because I'm like, so you just stop going to church, guys. Why are you going to church and doing all these things? Like, what's your conscience? Anything? And I'm like, okay, cool. So we go, and it's all these wild things. Again, a testament of what's happening and in our churches. And eventually I start again falling out with them and focusing with my circle of friends, and we do all these things. And I remember like one or two instances where God was so good to me. I remember like this one time I was driving under the influence, and my folks, I don't even know this to date. And I was under the influence of both weed and alcohol, and I was driving, and I drive really sort of fast. And I was driving, and we almost get into this crash. Twice in one day. In fact, both times I hit cars, but twice in one day. Both times I hit cars, and and I had to pay. And again, it's getting worse, and I eventually get to a point where I'm like, I'm just tired. And I start begging, I start talking to God again, and I'm speaking to God. I'm like, God, if you're out there, man. And for me, you see the difference with me, it's not like I ever left saying God isn't there. I had just had to make peace with the fact that I'm not going to go to heaven. So I was like, God, I know you're there. I know you're good. I don't doubt you because of everything I had learned. I was like, God, I know you're there. I don't doubt your existence. You're good. And I'm like, God, please help me, man. Like, my life is hard right now. It's terrible. Help me out. And
How was the depression? How bad was it? Did you get to a place where you were suicidal? How bad was it? Take me through that.
depression is a terrible thing, and I truly empathize with everyone going through it, because sometimes I watch stuff online and I'm like, one of the worst things people say to people who are depressed, or in general, because the whole point of depression is you don't know who's depressed. You usually don't. It's not obvious. It's not. Sometimes it is. It's not always obvious. People can dress up. People can show up. People can smile, but people are depressed. And one of those things that would constantly be said was, at least in guy circles, people are like, oh, people who are depressed are weak. Just find a girlfriend. The most ridiculous things. Oh, kwani uko depressed? Kwani wewe ni mwanamke? Which is wrong. People say stuff like that. And sometimes they don't realize they say it around people who are depressed. And so it's one of those things where I'm depressed. And for me, it got so bad. I was unable to work at this point. I'm unable to get out of bed. I'm unable to do anything at this. Anything. I'm just done. And I'm trying drugs, but I can't be perpetually high or drunk. So I would have to face it every now and then. And it gets so bad that for me, at least personally, it's one of those things where I'm like, just suicide. Suicide is the best way. And so what I start doing is I start planning. Actually, this is So before I start getting before I get suicidal, I was depressed, yes. And then I start seeking for God, and then I'd forgotten something. And I start talking to God. I remember this one day in particular, I go to Klabu. For those who don't know Klabu, it's a place in UN where people go eat and stuff like that. I just go there because it's close to home. I go there and I meet someone who's one of my friends in high school, one of my close friends, who one of those people who we used to share the gospel together and like really connect. And I'm like, oh. So I meet him, and when I meet him, he's like, hey, it's been long, it's been years at that point. Oh, it's been a while, stuff like that. We should catch up. And they tell me, so on Sunday, we're going for a funeral. And there were some students from UN who had passed. This is 2022 December. And they're like, they're not going for that funeral. There was another friend who had lost his mom, but this is a few weeks after that. They're like, we're going for a funeral. If you're not busy, you can travel so we can have like a full day to just talk. And I'm like, oh, I'm not really doing anything. Cool, let's go. And as I go, I meet a friend of mine who has become a very good friend of mine, and he was so instrumental in God bringing me and shaping me back together. And his name is Calvin Nyabuti. And I meet him, and as we're going there, we really connect. We start talking about God. Because the thing is, I'm not going to church, but I have information about God. And remember, for me, I never questioned the goodness of God. So I start talking about God and this and that, and we start connecting. And it's like, oh, I'm in UN, you can always come and we can chill and talk. And I start going because, again, it's just a walk from home. I walk there and we start talking a lot every now and then. We start talking about Christ, and he starts sharing with me Bible studies and stuff like this. And again, a few weeks before this, God had, over a year now, for so long, put it on my heart to get out of the relationship I was in. But I was fighting and everything was bad, but I still didn't want to leave. But eventually I choose only for God, for the sake of God. I'm like, okay, cool, God, I'll leave. And I leave. And a week or 2 weeks later, I meet Nyabuti. And he starts sharing with me. And now because now on Fridays, I don't have to meet my girlfriend and stuff like that. We don't have to do this, that. I have time. So he starts studying, and I'm growing. And Nyabuti is a preacher, so he like invites me to places he's going. And my relationship with Christ is growing and getting beautiful, and I'm growing. And then something happens. And this is now where, right before I start getting like super again depressed again, a second time. Yeah. So what happens is, we start, my uncles, there's uncles of mine who come. One of them doesn't live in the country, the other one lives here, but we don't hang out much. But I'm closer with the one who's not around. So when he came, we usually hang out together. And these are my mom's brothers, and we start hanging out, but they're like super into the party life and drinking and stuff like that. And because I'm with them all the time, I fall again. And for the next month, I think I drank more booze than I'd done in the years that I did. And I was consuming and I was consuming. It was amazing. But like super guilty now. Because of Christ. And it was so bad this time. And I was struggling. And at some point, after they leave now, I was supposed to move out of the country. But there was a hitch with some of my stuff, and I am unable to. And that makes me even more depressed because I wanted to go and be as far away from my home as possible. And so now I'm thinking about the fact that I have to be home for another 3 months, and I'm so sick of this, and I'm depressed now. And now I'm still guilty about what I had done for the month. And this is where, for me, it gets to suicide. And I'm like suicidal at this point. And over the course of a few months, I'm super suicidal, and I get to a point where I'm like, you know what? this is enough. And I'm thinking about how people commit suicide, and I'm like, you know what? Why do people find the most painful ways to do it? Let me think of an easy way around this. I'm not going to share it because I might be recommending us. Please.
It's okay. You may share. I mean,
Okay. Viewers, please do not
don't try this at
consider
home.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. So I'm like finding ways, and so I'm like, I decide that I'm actually going to commit suicide, but I'm trying to find the simplest way. And so what I do is I start thinking, oh, I used to get high all the time. Now the thing about being high is if you get, the thing about weed, marijuana, is if you are tired, you get insanely tired. Like you can sleep. There are people who use it as sleep medications. You can get very sleepy. So what I started to decide was, let me sleep deprive myself for a while, like 48 hours. That's before you start feeling sick. 48 straight, 48 and stuff like that. So I'm like, I'll do 48 straight hours of activity and do something. By the time I would be stoning, I'd be super, super tired. And now after that, I'd like CO, carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide. I wouldn't wake up, not for anything. So that was my plan. And I was foolproof. And I was like, and I'm going to, and I had a date, and I put it, and I lock the note so that no one knows. It was just saved time to leave. And this is in 2023. And I'm like, you know what? So there's this thing where when people settle in their minds to commit suicide, what happens is they have this burst of energy and happiness, and they have for a period of time, because now they have a solution to their problem. They have this burst of energy, and now I'm like, what to do? I'm like, I want to have fun this December. And Chauffeur, at this point, I joined Chauffeur, and like somewhere in August.
Chauffeur is for someone who does not.
Oh, sorry. For someone who doesn't know Chauffeur, Chauffeur is a choir. And right around the time I was supposed to leave the country, someone reached out to me and they're like, oh, we have an opening in Chauffeur. Would you like to join? And I'm like, oh, okay, I can come because I have time. And Chauffeur, at least to me, I was like, oh, Chauffeur sings amazing. So I want to join this choir. So let me spend my time here for the next 3 months or so. So this is August, late August. In December, people are going for a ministry to Botswana. And I'm like, this is amazing. Let me travel to Botswana, have the time of my life, and then come back to Kenya and then see my plan through. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll just go for it. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is I book the trip. Again, thanks to God. I was just going to have fun and come back home. And I'm almost positive if I didn't go for that trip, I wouldn't have anything to change my mind, because I was fixed on this. And so I go for the trip, and it's a 2-week trip, and it's end of years, the last 2 weeks of December, and I meet the most amazing people. I have the time of my life, both in that sense and in the sense of meeting real, authentic people who genuinely care for me at this point.
Let me ask, when you say you had the time of your life, was it better than the partying? Was it better than...
I'm glad you actually asked that, because I didn't think, who would have thought that just sitting with people, talking around campfires, going for hikes, having very little food would be some of the most amazing experiences I had in my life. So for me, what I then realized down there is what I was actually longing for in my heart was love, to be seen. And there's a person who says this. I forget who it is. It's a Christian author who says to be fully known is to be fully loved. And many of us don't know that this is what we are seeking, but it's what we truly want deep down, to be fully seen for who we are, to not perform, and to be fully loved. And I'm like, you know what? I had the best time of my life, and I meet all these people, and the speaker there, and I meet amazing people. Like there's this friend of mine in Chauffeur. She's not in Chauffeur now. She's called Chilande, and she doesn't. I don't think I told her, but I don't think she will ever understand how much she helped me through that, because she would talk to me, and certain things she would say to me were straight from the heart of God to mine. And I was fighting, and the conviction was getting stronger and stronger with different individuals. God was reaching out, and in my heart he was pulling and tugging. And you know, the 2 weeks we're doing, it's a ministry. It's not just us singing, it's a ministry. So we are meeting all these people, we're listening to all these messages, and it's like a church every day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day for 2 weeks. And I'm like, and God was putting in the work, and he tugs and he pulls. And eventually I give in, and I'm like, hey God, you have my heart. And I feel very sorry about what I was about to do. And so like I remember when I come back to Kenya, and when the day came, the reminder went off on my phone, and I see it. And it's about almost 2 months now from when I sealed the document, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it, because I'd scheduled it immediately after the trip. And I look at it, and I feel God in my heart, and I'm like, God is so good. And God was so good to me. And he starts bringing me up back into the faith. Now, steadily, not as a child who's trying to earn his father's love, but as a child who's being taught. Slowly but surely. And when I started, I mentioned this, that for me, part of the miracle, and it's that most of us romanticize darkness. We wear our past as battle scars, as where we are proud of them. You know, we are proud of them, that where you have people who haven't gone through experiences like this, people start saying stuff like, I don't have a testimony. But for me, the greatest miracle is that I was blind, but I now see. And it's a miracle that God is able to keep you in sight. That every single day, God is able to keep me. We fall, we get back up. And the thing about most testimonies that I've had anyways, and I have not heard this part, is that it doesn't stop being a struggle now that I've met God. There are still days when I struggle so bad, and I struggle and I hustle, but the point for me is God is faithfully there. And it's not this thing where I look at my scars, my battle scars, and wear them proudly and go to people and tell them, you don't know how much I was in the world. You don't know how I was the biggest alcoholic in Nairobi, or I was the biggest sex addict in Nairobi. We wear them as though they were badges of honor. But that's not, and it's, for me, it reminds me of the woman who goes and anoints Jesus' feet with perfume. He's moved so much, not simply because of the magnitude of her sin, but of the magnitude of the mercy of Christ. It's the mercy that makes the magnitude of your sin even count for something. That you didn't go through all that in vain. And so for me personally, it's one of those things where, and it's a reminder to everyone, if you have been able to grow in church, stay away from all these things, and still remain faithful to God, you don't need to experience it to have an experience with God, where it's now an authentic experience of, wow, God, look how far you've brought me. The thing a lot of people don't know about new birth is you're a new person, but you'll have to always fight the person you chose to become. Unlike someone, because think about this, if you've never had illicit sex, illicit substance, you'll never have to fight it. I will have to fight that until Jesus comes, you know. And for me personally, it's the beauty of a Jesus who comes to the pits, gets you out, and miraculously sustains me every day. Every day, there are days you wake up and it's so bad, you despair so bad, and you want nothing but to have your old life. Because at that point, it feels like the walk of a Christian is too difficult. But Jesus comes back and he reminds me, you can do this. And he sustains me. And for the very people who were not ever brought up in this way, and they didn't have to struggle with certain things, they don't sometimes the problem with that is sometimes they underlook just how much it takes for God to keep and sustain them as well. God doesn't sustain you because you fell too far. He sustains you because you are born a human being. If you're a human being, it's a miracle that you are sustained every day. Yeah, and so that's my story thus far. And God is keeping me, God is sustaining me. There are days where it's harder, there are days where it's amazing. There are days it's just beautiful to sit with Jesus and hear his voice. And then there are days where I am like, whew, you know? And so for me, the miracle, my testimony isn't how far God has brought me, but it's the fact that he keeps me every day. That he will keep me today, he will keep me tomorrow. That's my story.
Amen. Amen. That's oof. It's heavy. It's a powerful, powerful testimony. I don't know if you have, an encouragement or something that you can tell someone who's going through what you went through, or is in the pits, if I can say, of the miry clay. What you can just tell them to encourage them that, it can get better. God can come through for them. Yeah. Or what they should do.
I'll start by acknowledging that there are people who will watch this and encounter this who don't know God, or they don't really choose this God. They actively deny him, or they actively reject him, which God doesn't. God is patient with us. And so I'll start with, if there is someone out there who is seated watching this and who encounters this, who is struggling right now in their belief with God, who doesn't know God, or who doesn't want anything to do with God, that this, I would tell them, because I usually tell people this that for me the greatest evidence for God is subjective. It's not objective. It's not, oh, look at the world, look at design and stuff like that. All these good arguments people give about God. My personal argument for God is, I was blind, but I see. You can't argue that with me. It's my experience, because for me, I was struggling and I was set free from that. I was in chains. I'm not in chains anymore. And so to everyone else, for my story, as someone who struggled, as someone who suffered, I met someone who was able to bring me out of that. And that someone for me is Jesus Christ. And it's not an overnight thing. It's a process. It's a journey of trusting. Because the days you'll start getting better, and then almost like you never had any progress. You'll fall even lower than you were. And it's the promise that this person will daily make you better and better and better. And whether people acknowledge this or not, a lot of our human struggles come from the basis of, is there anyone who truly understands what I am going through? For example, part of my experience with everything I went through was because I stayed there as long as I did, because the people who were there truly understood some of the things I was going through, and they received me wholeheartedly. With their full hearts, they didn't judge me. They were like, you're struggling, we're also struggling, come join us. But there's also another person who suffers and says, I suffered, come join me. And unlike human beings, he possesses the power to free us. And so for me, again, to everyone else, there is someone who genuinely cares and has invested all of the resources of this universe to get us from those pits. And he is invested, and he looks upon us with such tender interest and pity, and he desires for us to find him and to find his heart that loves us and is pointed directly to us, And so, to everyone, again, there is someone out there. And whether you believe him, whether you don't, give him a chance. And there's this song that usually says, when you can't trace his hand, trust his heart. Believe that this person who swears with his own life that I care for you, that I want the best for you, I have invested everything this universe could invest towards you. And one of my favorite writings says that his relationship and his love towards us is so tender, is so personal, as though we were the only ones in this universe. He cares for us so personally, as though we were the only ones. If you can meet that person and see the love he has for you, that's it for me. Because for me, that's the thing that changed me entirely towards him, where I was like, this person, God truly cares. Because deep down, when we struggle, most of us, it's from a sense of disbelief that God cares for us as much as he says he does. Because if I'm struggling, what's up with my bills? What's up with my relationships? What's up with my future? What's up with my career? What's up with all these things that we have a care for? But Jesus also cares for that. And so that's my message to anyone who's perhaps watching and listening to this.
Right. Now unto him who's able to keep us from falling and present us faultless. Yes.
Exceeding joy.
Yeah. I feel like that verse just came to my mind when I was listening to you. And I feel like, yeah, he has the power to do that, to present us faultless and to bring us out of whatever struggles we may have. So thank you so much for coming.
Let me cut you.
Yes,
sorry.
sure.
I forgot something. Just to anyone, by the way, who struggles with addictions, it is, and this is very important for anyone who struggles with addiction. It is the realization that you will never have a healthy relationship with that thing apart from Christ. You will never, even if you go 5 years without the struggle, 10 years, and one day you go back. It's normal, by the way. It's the realization that as long as you are apart from Christ, you will never have a normal relationship with this. And so, there's this overconfidence people get when they're 10 years, sometimes even a few months. I was struggling every day. I've done 5 months. Don't find any self-confidence. Trust only in God, because it's the realization that I will never have a healthy relation. Because the thing about the self-confidence we get is you start thinking, maybe I'm okay. And what happens? You play around with sin again and you fall. And this does so much, it undoes so much in our hearts, because we feel like I will never actually get better. But that's not God. And God reminds us that I am able to keep you standing. I am able to keep you from falling, as you said in the verse.
Yeah.
So it's never reliance on self. Because for me, one thing I remind myself is, today, without Christ, would be the day I fall again.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it reminds me of that when the Bible says that if there's a demon and then you get it out and then you leave that house void, then it will go and bring 7 demons even worse than itself. So if you don't fill that void with Christ, then if you fall, you're going to fall 7 times worse. Yeah. So as you say, apart from Christ, you can't really get over whatever addiction you have. So you have to fill that void with Christ for you to be able to overcome it completely. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for opening your heart to us, that we are able to experience what you have experienced. We are able to hear what the Lord has done for you. Yeah, I'm sure that your testimony will speak to many. And I think to anyone out there, if you have a testimony, if you want to share what the Lord has done for you, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll have the information on the description down there. And so please feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.